and here's part of why. With our closing story, which we try to end on something light. This isn't really light, but it is, I guess, fun, sort of, at least if you're geeky like us, insofar as it leaves you scratching your head. So this is an article from Bloomberg talking about how ChatGPT is wowing office workers, i.e. enterprise workers that we cover, and that it's in contrast and at the expense of Microsoft, which of course famously has licensed OpenAI's models
Hmm.
to produce their Copilot product and has been going to market. And so the article goes through a whole bunch of sort of analysis around this and the competitive dynamics behind it, and basically saying how there's been a whole bunch of companies that started with Microsoft and are now finding that their employees prefer ChatGPT. And it's shocking for two reasons. First, by all accounts, and it's always hard because people don't disclose what they're actually paying, but by all accounts, ChatGPT is as much as twice as much as Microsoft Copilot. And Copilot is using the exact same model underneath the
Hmm.
covers that ChatGPT is, obviously, because they're both OpenAI. And so I was sitting here, and the article really doesn't do a great job of explaining why people like it better or what it is. I know you have a hypothesis you're going to share, but I found it bewildering. And so when we talk about why this is so tough, this makes zero sense. Like, why in the world is ChatGPT winning here, or at least anecdotally winning here? It just defies logic. And so anyone who says they've got the AI stuff figured out, it's like, yeah, okay, explain this one to me then.
Yeah, I find it super weird as well from a pure technical perspective, as we all know that Microsoft and OpenAI were basically married and joined at the hip a year ago when it came to AI strategy. And not that much has changed over the past year for their products to completely split off and become all that different. And also, I believe ChatGPT has higher price points overall. They've
Right.
experimented with extremely high price points up to $200 a month, I believe, per user, whereas Copilot tends to be cheaper, and you tend to be able to tweak things within your Microsoft contract if you really want something, and they're usually happy to give you all sorts of stuff for free as long as you sign up for your ongoing Windows contract going forward across your thousands of users. So there's all sorts of things that Microsoft can do that should theoretically be more attractive than OpenAI. And Microsoft has the apps that OpenAI doesn't have.
Right.
So, at first glance, it just doesn't make sense, right? Other than that, OpenAI's simply their UX, the way that you go into ChatGPT is well known, and it takes up your entire screen, and it provides more canvas for you to work with than the Copilot does, which is kind of stuck to the side of whatever app you're working with. That's literally the only difference that I can see between the two products that is all that meaningful for, call it, 80% of white collar workers.
Well, one of the things that's interesting that the article, I won't say it comes out and says it, but it alludes to the fact that part of the situation may simply be the fact that ChatGPT was so successful on getting that sort of mind share at a consumer level that, to your point, anybody could just go and use it on their own and go to the website and create an account for free and set it up, that it created this comfort level with it that it just felt more comfortable. And this, what's interesting about this is the consumerization of IT that I
Mhm.
actually wrote my first book around, because I saw that you had people like Apple and the iPhone and Facebook and introducing these technologies that were just a delight to use and super easy, and that the enterprise was behind. And so I think if there's one thing that this may speak to, we've talked about the fact that Microsoft has like what 130 or something co-pilots in market now, all these different flavors of it. It's integrated into everything, and so it's not this sort of really simple interface, right? It
True.
has that complexity, and so it does make me wonder if it's that same sort of function of that that consumerization that led to this sense of adoption that made people just more comfortable with it. um, it's just fascinating to me, and so I don't 100% know what to do with it, and I think it's clearly a warning sign for Microsoft. I mean, I certainly don't count them out, because I do think in the end, from an enterprise perspective, they're going to have a lot of traction from it. But I think the strategy here hasn't completely panned out. Which, by the way, the other part of the news we didn't talk about is that there's ongoing battles right now around the definition of AGI that have been bubbling for a while, specifically because of this potential rift developing between Microsoft and OpenAI. Because, ironically enough, that's one of the clauses in the contract that allows OpenAI to get out of the relationship with Microsoft. So, yeah, this is going to be an interesting space to develop over the next, I was going to say a few years, but in this, that's like dog years. So maybe a few months. I don't know.
Yeah, I also wonder if Microsoft is showing that sometimes more isn't better. Maybe the best AI is a simple AI that has not had all these other gewgaws and doodads added on. That's technical enterprise technology speak for governance and context. But perhaps we've already reached peak AI usefulness from the model perspective, and ChatGPT reflects this is what is actually most useful, or at least most palatable for the average user at this point. And we don't have additional advances to make. Just like the iPhone quickly got to a certain form factor, and then after the first 4 or 5 iPhones, there hasn't really been that much of a change ever since, other than improving the camera over time.
Yeah, so one other thing, actually, you say that did strike me. One of the comments, and I almost dismissed it until you said this right now, and it just sort of triggered. One of the comments that one of the people that was interviewed for this article mentioned was that there was a lag, that Microsoft, that a new development or a new feature in ChatGPT would often lag before it hit Copilot. And Microsoft's response, I think rightfully so, was that they had to go through a round of testing and validation to ensure that it was enterprise ready. And what I find interesting is that sort of implies, that was sort of a shot across the bow to OpenAI, that they are not making it enterprise ready. I don't know if that's true or not. But I do think there's something to be said. I mean, I have often talked about the fact that part of the challenge is that the enterprise tech stack is necessarily more complex. We need more governance. We need more controls. We need all of this ability to understand what's going on as we start talking about true agents rolling out. There's a reason Salesforce made this announcement, and the reason ServiceNow has their control tower. And all right, we need this ability to manage all of this in a cohesive, organized fashion, and any consumer-oriented, that's always that price of the simplicity, which is why Apple, as an example, going back to them, has always struggled to really make serious inroads in the enterprise. It took them a long time to be able to kind of get that level of control. So we'll see how this shapes out. I think it's going to be really fascinating to watch. But this article just sort of blew my mind. Just as I was reading through it, it was like.
Yes, apparently Coke and Pepsi are different, or Coke and Coke in this case. Coke and Coke with a label are apparently different. Microsoft Coke is different from Coke. That's what I've learned.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, there we go.
And